Hello and welcome to Running the Table, the podcast where we run through everything on the table in the world of sports. And we're back once again with Boom Bust or Believable, where we're continuing to work our way through the Big Ten, breaking down the men's basketball teams and their outlook for the rest of the season. Up next at preseason number 4, we're looking at the Michigan State Spartans. But before we get into the breakdown, I'd like to acknowledge the tragedy that occurred on Michigan State's campus last week. We here at Running the Table and people around the country mourn with the Spartans following the loss of 3 students in that thoughtless attack. The battle to stop these types of tragedies being commonplace in our country is an ongoing one, and we will not stop until we can keep our students and children safe. But getting into the actual breakdown, we're looking at Michigan State, who currently stands at 16-10 and 8-7 in the Big Ten, which puts them at tied for 8th with Illinois. Some of their guys in terms of key players, we're looking at starting off with Joey Hauser at 13.9 points, 7 rebounds per game, shooting 86.2% from the free throw line and 43% from three. So he's been a massive guy for them. Really, when he plays well is when Michigan State's offense tends to do well, but he's had games where he'll shoot the ball 15, 17 times, and sometimes where he only shoots 4 or 5. So they need to do a better job of getting him the ball, because as you can see, when he does, he shoots the ball really well. And then you've got leading at the point Tyson Walker at 13.7 points, 2.4 rebounds, and 2.6 assists per game, as well as getting 1.2 steals per game. Good for 39.8% as from three as well. Another guy at guard for them, a bigger, more physical guard, is AJ Hoggard, who's averaging 11.8 points, 3.8 rebounds, and 5.8 assists per game. So he does a lot of that, running the offense and dishing the ball out, which is why he's so good at getting as many assists as he does. And then another big guy for them, coming off the bench typically, although they may try to get him back in the starting lineup at some point, is senior Malik Hall. He's averaging 9.1 points, 4.4 rebounds per game, and shooting 82.8% from the free throw line, as well as 41.4% from three. So you see a lot of their higher scoring options are guys that do shoot the ball well from three, other than AJ Hoggard. But for Malik Hall, he was out with injury for part of the year, and since he's come back, they've had a bit of a revitalization in their offense, and he's obviously just a great presence with his seniority and leadership out on the floor. But taking a look at their KenPom rankings, they currently sit at 75th in the country in terms of adjusted offensive efficiency and 27th in terms of adjusted defensive efficiency. So their defense is up there with some of the best in the country, but their offense is sort of comes and goes, and that's a big reason of why they've struggled to win a lot of games this season. But that rounds out for an adjusted efficiency margin of 35th, and their adjusted tempo sits at 309th. So you see a lot of times with guys like Tom Izzo and Matt Painter in the Big Ten, they're really kind of that slow it down. We're going to run our sets and try to impose our will, and you do what we want to do. So that's why they're so far down there at 309th in terms of possessions per 40 minutes. But they also have a strength of schedule of 3rd. So they by and far have had one of the toughest schedules in the country, and you can see how that has shown presence of that in their record, because they have lost quite a few games. But also welcome to the Big Ten. Looking at some of those key wins and losses, they started off the season really hot, and a couple of these games come here right at the beginning of the season, with a loss against number 2 Gonzaga at the time, 64-63, and that was played on the USS Abraham Lincoln, and that was the first time that they were able to have a game out on the water since 2012. That was back on November 11th. And then they followed that up with a win versus, at the time, number 4 Kentucky, 86-77 in double overtime in the Champions Classic that was held in Indianapolis, Indiana, in Gainbridge Fieldhouse on November 15th. Then in the middle of the season, they followed up with a bit of a rough loss at Notre Dame, 70-52. Notre Dame has not turned out to be a very solid team, so that is not looking as a very pretty loss for them. More recently, on January 19th, they had a home win against Rutgers that was number 23 at the time, 70-57. So they've been up and down all over the season. They had a good non-conference stretch in the middle there where they were able to rack up a couple of wins, but Big Ten play has been notoriously rough this year for a lot of teams, and the Spartans have certainly felt felt the results of that. But they currently find themselves sitting at a number 7 seed in Joe Lenardi's most recent bracketology update. And this comes after a rough 3 weeks where they lost 5 of their 7 games across that span, although they did find themselves on a 2-game winning streak after winning both of their games last week before the campus-wide shutdown for some of the past week before dropping their return game at Michigan most recently. But in terms of their overall lineup, their unique small ball lineup has proven to be difficult to match up for some teams, but very exploitable for other teams. For example, in their home win over Rutgers in January, they were able to hold them to 34.4% from the floor and 11.8% from three because their individual matchups allowed them to make Rutgers uncomfortable on both ends. Whereas against a team like Purdue with a dominant big man and National Player of the Year frontrunner Zach Edey, they struggled mightily, where Zach Edey scored a combined 70 points and grabbed combined 30 rebounds in the 2 games against Michigan State this year. But right now, the Spartans are playing for a lot more than just an NCAA tournament bid, but they do find themselves at that 7 seed. So throughout the rest of their schedule, they have home games against Indiana and at Iowa next. They'll be looking to build up some momentum with the whole country behind them as they try to solidify their spot in the tournament. But that's all I've got for today. I'm going to keep trying to crank out these breakdowns for the rest of the Big Ten teams before Selection Sunday. So expect to see plenty more college basketball content as we get closer and then into March. But here on the channel, we've got tons of other content from the NFL season and beyond, as well as the return of MLB content around the corner as that season gets closer. But if you want more from us, check out other videos, like and subscribe. And until next time, peace.
Hey, Tim, when am I going to get to be in one of these?